Kathy Slayton in Florida, you are up with Julia.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. So, hey, Julie again. And so here's my question. I'm going to kind of dovetail a little bit on what Sunny had asked earlier and a little bit about what Dr. Stacy asked about as well. So I've been in the consulting, IT consulting industry for around 20 years, let's just say, give or take a few. And so what I have seen is, in particular, and it's not necessarily what I've witnessed, is not necessarily those skill sets that we've been talking about today that maybe make or break a woman's career. It's age. And what I have witnessed is that once a woman in this field kind of gets to be a certain age, she might get put out to pasture. And so the promotions aren't there, you know, the large consulting engagements aren't there, and so that type of thing. But if you're a man and you're 65, an old crusty sea dog, you're going to maintain being a partner, and, you know, that's kind of so I just wanted to hear your perspective on that. And because it seems like the tide is somewhat turning for women in these leadership roles if you are younger. But if you have reached a certain age, I know this is controversial, and but that's the, you know,
I think that you're talking about something very real. And there are two women in the book who talk about this. One is Julie Wainwright, who was the CEO of The Real Real. And she was told she was too old before she founded The Real Real, which she then took public. She was told she was too old to ever get a job again. She was also CEO of Pets.com around that disaster in 2000. But she said, you were too old and you're a woman. Those are two strikes against you. Deirdre Packnad, who's the CEO of Workboard, which is a big enterprise software company, has also been told she was she's a woman, and B, she's too old, which are two strikes against her. So this is something that a number of women have talked about. Interestingly, when you look at the research around intersectionality, we think of intersectionality as referring to race, this idea of multiple marginalized identities. Gender and race are usually the two we're talking about, sometimes sexuality. But what's interesting is that age is another element that plays into it. So if you're a woman and you're old, those are two marginalized identities, and you're going to be maybe minimized because of that. So it's interesting. I think it's very important that people talk about it. And also, I think that this is another reason why when it comes to things like promotions, it's really important to use data rather than relying on sort of instinct or impulse, or like this person seems like they'd be a good fit for the organization. It's also particularly interesting for me seeing people like Bob Iger return. He retired in no small part because he was getting older, but now you have this generation of leaders of these companies who are incredibly, you know, older compared to how sort of what was considered a responsible retirement age. So you're right to identify the bias in terms of what it'll take to change it. Hopefully some very successful women in their 60s are going to help change the patterns of what it looks like to be a successful woman. So I think the more that everyone can highlight those success stories, the more it changes the expectations that women are only, you know, going to be more important when they're younger. But I do think that this society in general does have a bias towards youth, and that's why we idolize these young men who are the, you know, Mark Zuckerberg model, or frankly, Sam Bankman-Fried. His youth was seen as an advantage, but I think the conversation around that may change.
Perfect. Thank you.